Hey guys, so picking up from where we left off in the last lesson, we're going to carry on looking at shape layers, and this is pretty much exactly where I left it. So we have a shape here, so we have the path, which is this circular path here, this one, and we have a gradient fill, which is filling our center here, and then we have our two strokes. If we drop our strokes above our fill, our strokes will appear above our gradient as well, which is kind of cool. I'm going to change this to not having a gradient because the kind of stuff I'm going to want to show you at the start can just be shown with strokes, and to avoid confusion I'm going to delete one of these strokes as well. So as you can see here, we have lots and lots of, so I've shown you all these: fill, stroke, gradient, fill, gradient, stroke. I pretty much just fill and stroke, and you can change them up here once you've added them, or in here. All that kind of stuff is fairly straightforward. This is all about creation, which you can create with the pen and the shape tools here, so I've kind of shown you that as well. I'm just going to move this up here so we can see this as I'm doing it. Perils of using a small screen. Right, let's have a merge paths, don't really use that much. Offset paths is, you're going to really see it here. Okay, if I go into stroke here, and let's have a look at some of the options. We've got width for sure. We can also add dashes. So dashes allows me to create this. If I fit this to 100, allows you to create a dash along the path. So again, we're still using these kind of the same path, but we've actually added a dash to the path now, and we have an offset here. And if we add a path offset, it kind of does the same thing, but it can be applied to the path in a kind of inwards and outwards. So obviously we have the path here, but this will move the stroke away and towards the stroke, and obviously at the moment our path is trying to keep these dashes there. If I remove that, we can change that to just back in. So what it lets you do is have the path and basically moves it away from this, either in a positive or negative value, which if you've used Illustrator before, it has again exactly the same kind of function. And a lot of the things in here are pretty much Illustrator tools, so if you use Illustrator quite a lot of this is going to seem quite straightforward to you. So I'm going to get rid of offset paths there. We're going to go to the next one, which is puck and blow, which I kind of messed around with at the end of the last lesson. And this literally just either brings your path in or out, and the more you go, the crazier it gets. It will just basically keep bending. It allows you to create some kind of funky shapes, which are kind of cool. Again, with these you can just turn them off, you can hide them, you can do whatever you want. Just know that they can always be brought up again with this menu. Repeater does exactly what it says on the tin. Here we can create the Aldi symbol and get sued, or we can create more circles, and where they're offset is chosen here. So this is like how far they're offset left and right away from the original path. Not that useful. This, however, is, as you can see here, they're being offset by 100 and 0. If I bring this to 0, they're all going to be appearing on top of each other. Now I can create, I can scale them in, I can scale them out. Again, I can animate this for some kind of trippy effects. Bring it in, bring it out. Rotation is not going to really show much right now. Let me see what else I can do. So if I bring them in, and you have start and end opacity here, and so this will kind of fade either the first one or the last one depending on which way you look at it. So if I bring this in here, you can see here the last one is starting to get really faded, and the more copies I add, the more this effect will be spread out over those circles. So this right now, and again, can move this path dynamically to create some kind of cool shapes, which again would be pretty hard to recreate in without using this kind of function. So you can create this kind of like infinite, I don't know, like bike path, or this could be a logo, I guess. There's lots and lots of possibilities, and the best thing about this is it's all here. Rotate is just going to rotate these around the axis, which is to what they're doing there. If I can move them away. So as you can see here, repeater is super powerful, and I'm going to come back to repeater a bit later on. So I'm going to just turn rotation down to 0 here and 0 here, and I'm just going to turn repeater off for now as we move on to round corners. So round corners isn't really going to make much sense with a circle, because guess what, a circle has no corners. So if I create a rectangle here, kind of bordering on being a square but not quite, and I bring in the not the repeater, the round corners here, and I activate this, you can see here what it's doing. It's just basically dynamically rounding off those corners, which is pretty simple. And once again, as with all of these, you can keyframe or not keyframe. So that's what round corners does, which is pretty useful. And as we keep moving down, we're going to see here probably the one I use the most, which is trim paths. Now what does this do? Well, in very simple terms, trim paths allows you to create a start and an end point for your circle. What does that mean? Well, let me explain this. You see, this is probably an effect that you're going to have to do more than times than an effect that I've done model animation, and I'm going to change these to easy ease just to make this slightly less jarring. Okay, so let's just loop this area. Might help if that went to 100, but you get the idea. Now let's add some rotation to that as well. Let's press R, and maybe we start back here. Actually, I'm going to swap these rounds, move that one there, move that one there. We're going to do easy ease again, right click, and we're going to do a similar graph. And now we've got a bit of a more dynamic movement. Now this is where shape players really come into their own, because I can turn on my repeater now, and look what's happening. We've got 4 doing exactly the same thing, and this is just so much fun, because if, for instance, we rotated this slightly, you can see now the start point is in a different place. It's here, it's there. It's let's just do a trim paths for the sake of it, and let's just make sure they start here all the time. And so now they're doing this kind of like Sushi Animation. Maybe we could start at, what I do a lot of the times is, if I want to create like a quick animation, is I will just scale these. If I bring my, sorry, those were the transform for the layer, and not so much for so I'm going to make sure that these things are here, and we can see here we're starting to get some way more interesting effects. Let me just bring this back to 100, bring that in the middle, and you can see here we've got a really cool effect going on. And I've lost my animation, which is less than useful. Let's hit U, my rotation. So let's start that back here, and you can see how this could get pretty cool pretty quick. I'm not using much here. Now, can we randomize the way these are placed? Because at the moment they're all starting from kind of the same place. Well, if you keep going down the shape tools, you'll find there's a wiggle transform, and wiggle transform basically allows you to transform something, but with a wiggly such a funny word, with a wiggly property. So if I do this, you'll find that these rings are just going to keep wiggling, because they're wiggling up and down on the X here. I can wiggle them on Y as well, so they're kind of just like jiggling all over the place. But the cool thing about this is, if you turn the if we come to the wiggles a second, if you turn this off, then this just becomes a parameter for, you can randomly change the rotation of these, because if you place this, I believe it's before the trim paths, you can see that it's having a different effect because it's being applied before the other effects and stuff. So lots of cool things in here, and so that does that. You can like I say, we've played with the trim already. You can rotate that around, so just kind of experiment with you know, I can always dynamically add more of these. And we've turned the wiggle off there, but wiggle transform is really powerful. Wiggle paths does kind of the same thing, but it does it along the path instead. So now we've got wiggle paths, we can make this like this, and now we've got these kind of paths are just like wiggling, but in the y direction of the path, which is outwards of the path. So again, you can see how that could be useful and fun, and you can increase or decrease the detail here in case you want to make the effects less pronounced. And we appear to have made the Star of David there somehow. And last but not least, we have zigzag, which kind of does the same thing as wiggle paths, but you can do it around the corner, you can do it around smooth, and add more or less ridges. And as you can see here, this is a lot more organized than wiggle paths. It's really specific pattern, like a crinkly pattern, and you can move this bigger or smaller according to here. So you can see how that can create a cool effect. Like you can, if I was to just draw a straight line here and we were to make it like this, and just to show you a quick example, say we wanted to make a little element that looks like it was busy on a bar graph or something, we could, first of all, we could add repeater, make a few copies of this, and then next we want to wiggle the transform, and maybe we want some of these to be, I'm going to turn the wiggles per second down to 0, but maybe some of these will be more slanted, and if we turn wiggles per second on, you can see it can do like this kind of bouncing accordion effect, which is kind of neat. Again, I've rotated these here, so they're not going to do as much there, but if we come into the transform repeater, we can scale some of these down as we go along. You can see here that there's just so much potential for having fun, and then maybe we wiggle the, there's so many options. Tell you what, I've just realized I've hit 13 minutes, so why don't you guys go and experiment, and you can see how you can quickly create multiple like moving shapes with this. Let me turn this wiggle on and get it to wiggle up and down. There we go, look, we got a bouncing animation, and yeah, just go out and have fun with these. Again, experiment with moving these up and down here. You can add more randomness by just making sure the repeater is before the wiggle transform, and you can see how we could have like almost like a bar graph and these kind of things moving independently, and that's all being created from one solid one shape as well. So yeah, hope you had fun, guys, and hopefully you have no more questions about shape layers, and you have a good idea of what they can do and how they can be used in your compositions. So go ahead and have fun, and I'll see you in the next lesson.